What's up, everybody? How's it going? Today we're going to be taking a look at a new emulator that released on the 3DS. It's called Red Viper, and it's an emulator for the Virtual Boy, which, if you don't know what it is, I recommend watching a video on it. It's actually a pretty interesting console. It's technically Nintendo's first ever attempt at VR, actually, which is pretty crazy for it coming out in the 90s. Despite how cool I may have made it just sound, the console itself is associated with neck cramps, and many people say it's very painful on your eyes too. Now, I personally don't have any experience with the Virtual Boy, but that's why I was excited when I saw this, and I wanted to check it out. As many of you know, the Virtual Boy used stereoscopic 3D, much like the 3DS, and that's why I think this emulator is so significant. You can emulate the Virtual Boy on pretty much anything, but this is the only emulator I've seen that you can actually use the 3D in it. Now, the Virtual Boy only had 14 games released for it in the United States, so I went ahead and downloaded all 14 of them so we can show them off here today. This first game we're going to be checking out is called 3D Tetris, and I'm not quite sure if I was missing something here or what, but I feel like it's kind of a crappy game. I know this console has quite the cult following though, so I'm sure there's probably fans of this game out there somewhere. Something I want to highlight is that the Virtual Boy controller actually has two D-pads, one on each side, and as you can see, that kind of presents an issue with the control scheme of the 3DS. And that's where these virtual buttons come in. So as you can see on the screen, I'm switching between the D-pad and the two face buttons, A and B. Now, I know what you're thinking. And yes, I agree, virtual buttons suck. But that's why it's nice on the new 3DS models, you can actually use the second C-stick for the second D-pad. As you can see here, it's super simple to switch out ROMs as well. You just pause it and select a different one. So the second game we're going to be checking out is called Galactic Pinball. And I actually really like the way the 3D is used in this game, because there's actual depth to the pinball table. And something I'd like to address real quick, you might see some image flashing or some double image on the screen while I play, and that's actually just because I'm recording this in 3D. Whenever you're playing this for yourself, you won't see that, but obviously my phone camera can't record a 3D image, so that's why you notice it in the video. I think this pinball game is pretty fun, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the pinball game on the old Windows computers, but I would argue that this one is actually cooler because it's actually 3D. Something else I'd like to mention real quick, some of these games are definitely not playable in 2D in my opinion. Some of them I definitely think you have to play them in 3D in order to be able to actually figure out what's going on. This game definitely plays fine in 2D mode though. The next game we're going to be checking out is the creatively named Golf. I'm definitely not much of a golf guy myself, but I still think this is pretty cool for what it is. The only golf game I've ever really enjoyed is golf on Wii Sports. This game is definitely playable in 2D mode as well, but the 3D looks really good on this one, I will say. I think what's cool about the 3D on this is how the shot meter kind of pops out at you, and whenever the ball pops up on screen to mark where you're hitting your shot, that pops out at you as well, and it's pretty cool. Moving on, next we're going to be checking out Jack Bros. I think the way the 3D is used in this game is really cool as well. And while I think that this game is technically playable in 2D mode, you won't get the full enjoyment out of it than you will in the 3D mode. What's cool about the 3D in this is not only do the characters pop out at you, but there's multiple heights to the stage, I guess you would say, and the top level that you're walking on sticks out above the bottom level. So it's really cool the way it uses that. And the walls that surround your character also kind of pop out at you a little bit. And to move on to the next level, you collect the keys and you jump down to the level below you. It's also a really cool effect seeing the stage below you come up towards you as you jump down. Overall, I think this game is pretty fun though, and I'll probably be checking it out further. Up next, we're going to be checking out Mario Clash, and I think this game is really cool. It's actually kind of a spin on the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, but the 3D in this is really good too. So what's cool about this is you start in the area towards the front, but not only can you throw things to the back area, but you can also walk back there and move around. Now, while the 3D definitely enhances the play in this game, I think it definitely would play fine in 2D mode, because you'll still be able to see everything just fine. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at Mario's Tennis. This game was a pack-in title for the Virtual Boy, and I really like the way this one is because there's actual depth to the tennis court. This game is definitely playable in the 2D mode, but the 3D mode makes it much easier because you can tell with the timing of the ball when you need to hit it. As you can see, the gameplay is pretty simple, but it's still pretty fun to play. Next on the list, we're going to take a look at Nestor's Funky Bowling. And this one's a pretty weird game, but I don't know what more you could get out of a bowling game on a console like this. Also, clearly this guy has some anger issues because every time you don't get a strike, he tries to pull his hair out and gets angry. This game is definitely perfectly playable in 2D mode, and honestly, out of all the games, I think this one utilizes the 3D function the least. You can definitely tell there's some 3D motion, but most of it is just a little bit of depth. Next is Bomberman Panic Bomber. This game isn't quite what I expected. To me, it kind of just feels like a weird Puyo Puyo clone, but it's definitely playable in 2D mode, and the 3D effects in this one aren't the greatest either. As you'll be able to see by the gameplay, it's pretty similar to Tetris, although obviously not the same. You're trying to match 3 of the same, or more. You can do 3 or more, and then they'll pop. But whenever you land, stuff will fall to the bottom, unlike Tetris. Next up, we're looking at Red Alert. This game reminds me a lot of the original Star Fox, just the way it looks and the way it plays, though this is much more wireframe. The 3D effects are pretty cool in this game, but because of the wireframe graphics, I would deem it pretty much unplayable in 2D mode, just because everything blends together and it's hard to tell what's what. This game actually seems pretty interesting though, and it might be one I check out more later. Now we're going to be taking a look at Teleroboxer. This is actually one of the more interesting games on the list. I think this game makes the best use of the 3D, because whenever the opponent throws a punch at you, it actually looks like it's coming towards you, and the depth just works really good in this. This is another one that is definitely playable in 2D, but the 3D just makes it so much more enjoyable. Now we'll take a look at Vertical Force, and this is one of the better uses of the 3D technology as well. I think this one's interesting because you can kind of go from where you're at starting, and you can kind of dive lower, more into the background, and it gives you a good sense of depth there. And I think it's cool because there are enemies that you have to fight and destroy in the top layer and the bottom layer. As much as I didn't think this one would play well in 2D, it actually translates pretty well and makes it perfectly playable in 2D, in my opinion. Next, we're going to be taking a look at what is arguably one of the best games on the Virtual Boy, and that is the Virtual Boy Wario Land. Pretty much all the games featuring Wario are good, so this comes as no surprise to me, but I actually find it interesting. It seems like, from what I can tell, this is one of the first games to use the gimmick where you can kind of go into the background in a 2D platformer, that is. But it's interesting that this game kind of pushed other games to go in that direction. Donkey Kong Country Returns is one game off the top of my head that I can think of that does this too. Even something as recently as Mario Wonder, you can do that multiple times in that game. So that being said, I do like the way the 3D is utilized in this game because of how much further the area that I'm in right now sticks out compared to the background sections. And I also think that this is one that is perfectly playable in 2D despite that. Here's one of the sections that I referenced where you can kind of jump between the foreground and the background. And not only do I think the way you do it is pretty cool, but it's just a really cool 3D effect. Second to last on the list, we're going to be checking out Virtual League Baseball. And not really a baseball game guy, but I will say it reminds me a lot of the bases loaded games on the NES. That was one that me and my brothers used to play a lot, and the gameplay feels pretty similar to it, especially when you're up at bat. Like the golf game, I feel like it doesn't really utilize the 3D technology the greatest, but you can definitely tell it's there. And I think it's perfectly playable in 2D, but the 3D effect does help you be able to tell how close the ball is when you need to hit it. Lastly, we're going to be checking out Waterworld, and I'd never heard of this game, but right off the bat, I think the soundtrack is really cool. I can't really tell, but I think you're fighting all of these people on jet skis while you're on a raft. Not sure if that would really be my choice, but whatever. Anyways, though, this game seems pretty fun, and the 3D effect is good in this. I also think that it is easily playable in 2D mode. So anyways, with that is all of the North American Virtual Boy library. And I'm not sure if you can play any of the Japanese library on this emulator, but that might be something I check out in the future. But let me know what you guys think of these games. I definitely think there's some hidden gems in there that are worth checking out. And one last thing I want to show off about this emulator before we wrap up. I know a lot of people complain about the red color, so you can actually go in here into the settings and change it to whatever color you want if the red bothers you, or if you just can't see it as well. There are also these quick buttons to the side where you can return to the red if you want, or you can even go to just a plain gray color. I think the gray is pretty boring, and I myself prefer the red, but I think the other colors look fine too. If I had to pick another color, I think this bluish color would work best out of all the other ones, in my opinion. Real quick, I'll show you guys just one more color, just so you can see the difference. I'll go ahead and go to a purplish color, But you can see you can pretty much change it to anything you want since there's a big color wheel. I definitely think that that is a good addition to the emulator. Definitely good quality of life, like I said, especially if the red bothers you. I know I've definitely heard of some people complaining about that with the original Virtual Boy. But that pretty much does it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. I definitely recommend checking this out, especially if you've never played the Virtual Boy games before. I haven't, but I had a pretty good fun time checking these out, and I'll probably be playing through some of them because they're pretty interesting. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you don't mind. Especially subscribe. I have some big stuff coming up, and I'll see you guys in the next one.